Coach Locksley had some very intriguing things to say after Maryland's second scrimmage.
You are Locked On Terps, your daily podcast on the Maryland Terps. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everyone? I'm Tre Moore, host of Locked On Terps, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And thank you for making us part of your day. And today's episode is brought to you by LinkedIn. These days, new potential hires can feel like high-stakes wagers for your small businesses. That's why LinkedIn Jobs help you find the right people for your team faster and for free. Post your jobs for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Terms and conditions apply. So we're under a couple weeks from the start of the college football season for the Maryland Terrapins, and there's actual real college football this weekend. This weekend is week 0. Teams like USC play, Notre Dame plays Navy. So there's big matchups this weekend. But, of course, the Maryland Terrapins kick off against Towson in just a couple of weeks. We're almost there, and Maryland just had their second scrimmage, and the offensive line still remains a big concern and could potentially hold us back this year. If you remember, after the first scrimmage, Coach Locksley talked about how it's not close to finding a starting five, how there's a bunch of guys still in the mix, and how they're not close at all. If you also remember, after the Big Ten crew, when they visited Maryland and talked about their offensive line struggles and how that could hold them back and how that was the biggest concern for the team. So it's been talked about a lot, how the offensive line could potentially hold us back and how there is reason for a lot of concern with replacing 4 starters across the offensive line. But after the second scrimmage, there hasn't been much of a change, it sounds like. Coach Locksley says he's still not close. We're not there yet in terms of finding a starting group. There's a lot of guys still in the mix. But on the bright side, he did say there is less of a learning curve because we are replacing 4 guys on the offensive line, but most of those guys that we're going to be replacing them with are new transfers that have played a lot of college football, meaning guys like Gottlieb and Bullock and other guys in their room have a lot of experience in other college football programs. They just either don't have the experience at Maryland or they don't have it at a Big Ten caliber type of program like Maryland is, but they do bring in experience, and Coach Locksley says that different experience that the different players have brought in has helped the learning curve, which is good to hear that has kind of showed up because we haven't heard much confidence boosters across the offensive line that have been like encouraging. And yes, that is good to hear about the offensive line. It's just been about the competition and that how they're not close to finding that group. But I want to go into a little bit of the competition and who's competing for what spot. So we know Delmar Glaze, one of our best offensive linemen and one of our best players. I ranked him as the second most important player on the offense, is starting at left tackle. It looks like he did play right tackle last year, but it looks like Gottlieb will start at right tackle, it looks like, which is kind of a mix because they kind of did it in reverse, which is interesting. I guess they feel more confident with Delmar Glaze at left tackle, but like I said, Delmar played right last year, and Gottlieb played a lot of left tackle last year. So it's interesting that they kind of mix those guys up, but they might have more confidence in Delmar Glaze at left tackle. And it looks like Corey Bullock will also start at guard. So those are the 3 that look kind of solidified. Obviously, Delmar Glaze is 100% solidified, but Bullock and Gottlieb look pretty solidified at right tackle and guard. But in terms of the competition, Purcell's, a transfer from Duke, is actually competing with Harris for the starting center spot. So that's a competition to look out for. And then also at the guard spot, Morgan, Kyle, and Kevin are all competing for the starting spot. at the guard spot. So that's kind of how it's shaken up so far. And that's why you can kind of tell that Coach Locksley has said that there's still plenty of guys in the mix and that they feel like they're 12 deep and that there's 12 guys that could play there on the offensive line, which I do find interesting. I do think there's some truth to it. I think I'm less concerned about the depth across the offensive line, and more concerned about actual finding the best five, because it sounds like we have plenty of guys that can relatively step in and play at hopefully a decent level. But I don't know if we have many guys that can come in and play at a high level. So I'm less concerned about someone getting injured and someone having to step in for a game or two and continue to play at a decent level. I'm concerned about it being a really good unit. And I don't know if we can expect the offensive line to be a really good unit. It just doesn't have that experience. There's many different people across the line, obviously new starters. So we got to keep a reasonable expectation for the offensive line because I'm really unsure what to expect. I'm hoping it's improving every day and that our staff is really working on it because it can really hold us back this year. Like I've talked about in other episodes, we go against some of the best pass rushers in all of college football this year and guys that are potential first-round picks in this year's NFL draft. So hopefully that group comes together because that can really be the difference between us winning a game or losing a game, or in an 8-win season, a 9-win season, or like a 6-win season or a 7-win season. So if we really want to take the next step as a program, I think the offensive line is going to be really important this year. So hopefully they continue to get it figured out. But a position group that is not of concern this year is the secondary. We've talked about it a good bit, but I think this secondary could be the best unit, one of the best units. I'm not going to say the best unit in the Big Ten, but one of the best units in the Big Ten. Coach Locksley says, I thought the experience probably played the biggest role, but I also thought Coach Williams and the defensive staff did a really good job mixing the coverages with how they adjusted their front. And then when also talking about Dante, Bo, and Tarheeb, the three returning starters, Coach Locksley said all of them are high trust guys. So obviously we have a lot of confidence in those three guys. I'm expecting Bo and Dante to be one of the best safety duos in all of the Big Ten. I'm expecting none of the less. They've played really well. Bo is projected to be a top 5 safety on a lot of NFL draft boards. And then Dante, if he wants to get his name in that conversation for the NFL draft in 2 years, and just taking this program in the secondary, continuing how well that we've played in the secondary and how many NFL players that we've had, it's kind of turned into we just keep turning out NFL players in the secondary, whether it was Cross, the starting safety for us a couple years ago, or whether it's Deonte Banks and Jacorian Bennett last year going in the 1st and 4th round. We've had plenty of guys in the secondary that have gotten drafted, and it has turned into one of our better position group. So I totally expect them to continue to play well. And Coach Locksley continues to give praise to them, which tells me they're playing really well in camp, which says that I'm guessing they've played well against our wide receiver group, that they've covered them pretty well. So why do I think that's a big deal? Because our wide receiver room is stacked with talent. There's plenty of high impact guys. So if our cornerback room is playing well against those guys, then that is a really good sign for things to come, because you're not going to play very many better, more talented groups this year than our group. Obviously, there's a couple. You got to put Ohio State up there. You could probably argue Michigan, Penn State, or a couple of wide receiver rooms that are just as good as ours or better. In terms of Ohio State, I would say is clearly better, but they do have the best wide receiver room in the country. So the fact that they are playing well against our wide receiver room in camp gives me a lot of confidence in that group, even more confidence than I had before. But that group should be a very good group. But next, we're going to talk about what we learned about the wide receiver room. Some very important information came across after the scrimmage. We'll talk about it after this ad from LinkedIn. These days, new potential hires can feel like high-stakes wagers for your small business. You want to be 100% certain. That's why you have access to the best qualified candidates available. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the right people for your team faster and for free. A lot of people need jobs right now, and if you want to find someone amazing for your company, LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates and you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Jaysean Jones might be the most underrated player in the Big Ten. We know what we're going to get from Jaysean on the field in terms of being our leading receiver last year, which he doesn't get enough credit for. And then also he's going to be Talia's favorite target this year. But Coach Locksley actually talked about after the second scrimmage of what Jaysean Jones has brought in terms of new leadership, that it's a new kind of thing for him. He said that after practice one day, Jaysean Jones, it was a bad practice. Team didn't play well, didn't live up to the standard. And Jaysean Jones got up in front of the team and said, we got to improve. We got to be better. That's not the standard we have and that we have set as a Maryland program. And if we want to compete for the Big Ten and whatnot, we have to play better. So Jaysean Jones has clearly taken a new step as a leader, which I think is vital in terms of this wide receiver room, because if you look at it, Coach Locksley actually touched on this, and then I also touched on this on another podcast. If you look at it, he's the only one that has played a ton of snaps in the Maryland offense. Obviously, Tyrese Chambers has played a ton of college football snaps now that he's a graduate student, but it hasn't been the Maryland system. Same with Caden Prather. He's played a lot of snaps at West Virginia, but other than Jaysean Jones, none of the guys have played a ton of snaps at Maryland. You could say Ty Felton has played a lot, but still, Ty Felton was only a sophomore last year. He did have like 300 yards receiving and played really well, and I think Ty Felton has a chance to make a huge impact this year. I think if you talk about underrated talents, I think Ty Felton's an underrated talent. But in terms of guys in the wide receiver room that have a lot of experience, Jaysean Jones is by far the number one guy in that room. So if we want the wide receiver room to come together, Jaysean Jones is going to have to be a vocal leader and continue to show that across not just the wide receiver room, but the whole team. Because guys are going to listen to Jaysean Jones. He's been through a lot at Maryland. He's torn his ACL. He's come back. He played a ton as a freshman. He's just gone through his up and downs as a Maryland Terrapin. So seeing him take on that new leadership role is going to be really important because we need leaders this year. Obviously, you always need leaders to be a really good team. But next, I want to touch on Caden Prather. He made one play that we saw on Instagram that showed us something that he could provide this year. So the clip showed Caden Prather, 6'4" wide receiver, West Virginia transfer, going up for a jump ball in Maryland's second scrimmage in the corner of the end zone and mossing the DB. Obviously, it's just one clip for social media, but I do think there is a lot to be unpacked just from this one clip. It shows how much he can bring this year, and he can bring that jump ball type of ability. I look at he can bring what Dante Demas brought for us for the last couple of years. I think he's a better athlete than Demas. I think he can separate better. I think he's a more explosive athlete than Demas, but I think he can also bring those 50-50 balls that Demas brought that can be game-changing type of plays, ones where Talia can just throw it up. Michigan defender is in his face, and Talia throws it up to Caden Prather, and we catch the ball and we get within 3 or something like that. You know what I mean? Or it's against Ohio State and Caden Prather comes down with a huge 50-50 ball to keep us in the game. I think plays like that can really make a difference. And obviously, we knew he was going to be talented, but he does have a chance to lead this team in receptions and yards. I know we talk about Jaysean Jones being that. I do have confidence that Jones will lead in reception yards because of how good he is as a route runner. But Caden Prather has a chance to definitely be the number one wide receiver. I think he's one of the most talented players on the team, one of the most talented wide receivers in the room. There's other really talented players like Octavian Smith. I think Ty Felton's really talented, like I kind of just said a couple minutes ago. Obviously, Tyrese Chambers, now graduate student. There's plenty of talent. Shalik Knox also. There's a ton of talent in that room. But the size that Caden Prather has is not a trait that is consistent across the room, obviously, because 6'4" wide receivers don't just come every day. Obviously, Shalik Knox, I'd say, would be the closest thing to that. He also has a good bit of size. But Caden Prather can provide contested catches this year, which I think is going to be really important. I think it also brings a red zone type of threat that we aren't going to be used to in a way that I don't think we really had a guy that can catch a fade route. Obviously, Dante Demas kind of brought that in ways, but I don't think last year we really saw that bring out of Demas, and we didn't really see him do much of that. So I think now that Caden Prather is here, he has game-changing type of ability. But I love where the wide receiver room is overall. So he brings that red zone target that is going to be really important this year. The coordinators hold the key to the success in 2023 season. We'll talk about it after this quick break. Should Maryland have confidence in their coordinators this year? Defensive coordinator Brian Williams is headed into year 2 in the defense as the coordinator, and we saw last year he helped the defense make a ton of jumps in a bunch of different categories, and I'm expecting that to happen again. I want to read this quote by Coach Locksley, what he said about Coach Brian Williams. He's a guy that's been here to see the trajectory of our program change and has played a major role in helping us get where we are today. And again, I still think his best football is still ahead of him as he becomes more comfortable and really helped himself on the back end with surrounding him with some great coaches. So I do agree. I think he's been a huge part of bringing in this program and improving it. He's definitely brought a new mold to the defense that has really helped. And we saw it last year. We saw it with Jayshon Barham being a true freshman All-American. We saw it with Deontay Banks and Jacorian Bennett getting drafted. Bo Braid having his best season yet. Like, we've seen what he's done for the players this last year. And I think we can do it even more this year with Coach Brian Williams. I have total confidence in him. But another interesting thing that Coach Locksley said that I really did want to talk about was that he said that Coach is one of the most emerging talents in the business, of course, and that soon he could have his own program. So that's interesting. It looks like Coach Brian Williams could potentially become a head coach sooner or later, and that he's one of the brightest stars Coach Locksley thinks in the coaching realm. And they often talk about that with coaches, that this guy is going to be a head coach before you know it. Happens in the NFL a ton, happens in college, whether it's a coordinator or in terms of the NFL, whether it's like a Sean McVay type of guy, a guy that's just a wizard type of guy, just a little bit different, picks up stuff faster, a really good young coach. And clearly Coach Locksley sees some of that with our defensive coordinator, Coach Williams. I don't expect him to leave soon. He put together one really good year last year. But I also think that it's important to acknowledge how good of a man and how good of a program leader Coach Locksley is, saying that I think he's one of the youngest stars in college football and that he soon should be able to have his own program. I think that's really important to see a coach that really is looking out for the best in terms of his other coaches, because obviously if he thinks this way of Coach Williams, he doesn't want to lose him. Selfishly, of course, he doesn't want to lose him. He wants him to be around for as long as he's around because he's such a good coach. But for him to go out there and say that he deserves a head coaching job soon, I think that shows Coach Locksley's unselfish and that he's just looking out for the best overall for everyone in the program, not just the players, the coaches, the staff, whoever it may be, the whole Maryland Terrapins football community. Coach Locksley is looking out for the best in terms of those guys for saying that, because he could have just said nothing and nobody would have said anything about it. You know what I mean? He could have said nothing about him becoming a head coach, and that pretty much coaches should be looking, or teams that are hiring new coaches should be looking out for him. So I think that's a really nice thing for Coach Locksley to say, and so shows how good we got it with Coach Locksley in terms of being our head coach. But I also want to touch on Coach Josh Gattis for a second. From an offensive standpoint, it's not a new system, and we do have some new concepts that we run for sure, Coach Locksley says. Josh experienced and some of the things he's been able to do since we last worked together, the success he had at Michigan, especially running the football, and some adjustments to things and how we've done it. So I want to focus on one thing in there, the running the football part of it. Obviously, Coach Gattis, when he was at Michigan, they ran the ball well. He also had a Biletnikoff winner at Michigan. So he's done a lot of good things as an offensive coordinator and an offensive mind. But I think the main thing I took away from this quote is that he's brought in some new run game concepts that could be really helpful this year, because obviously we have a really talented running back room in terms of Roman Hemby, in terms of Antoine Littleton, in terms of Ramon Brown, a freshman last year who didn't play a ton but is going to be a really good player. We have a group that's really versatile in terms of Roman Hemby's the explosive back, Antoine Littleton, short yardage, big bruiser type of player. We have really talented players across the running back room, but I think our concepts need to improve a little bit, and I think that's what Coach Gattis is bringing to the program. He's bringing some new run game concepts that I think will help a ton in terms of taking some of the pressure off of Talia, taking some of the pressure off of the passing game this year. Obviously, the offensive line is going to be a huge indicator on how much of those different concepts we can run and how much they honestly work. But if he can bring in a couple new concepts that can really help the run game, I think that can be the difference this year in our program and in the offense. I just think that can help a ton, because there's been times the last couple of years with Talia, I feel like we've been a little pass happy and that we've ran the ball well, that we haven't gone to it enough. So if he can get some new concepts and just run the ball a little bit more if it's working, milk the clock, especially in control time of possession, especially against Ohio States and Penn States. We don't want them to have the ball. So if we can control the possession a little bit more and just have better run game concepts overall that Josh Gattis brings in, then I think that can help a ton. But that's all for today. Please like and subscribe. We're here every day. College football season is starting soon. We're going to be talking about the Maryland Towson preview soon. So please like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Thank you. Bye.